Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee will continue as planned. That's what Wisconsin GOP Chairman Brian Schimming told us the morning after the apparent attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump at his rally in Pennsylvania.
Beyond words.
On Truth Social, the former president writing, despite the shooting, he won't delay his trip, planning to arrive in Milwaukee on Sunday.
We want to make America great again, and the way to do it is to have a unified convention here in Milwaukee, and the plans have not changed.
During the RNC, we'll hear more about the Republican platform, delegates' reactions, and who Trump will pick as his vice presidential nominee.
It's going to be fantastic, and we get to showcase Milwaukee to the world.
I spoke to Wisconsin Democrat Chairman Ben Wickler a few days before the shooting.
The Republican National Convention is the gathering of MAGA.
Wickler condemning Saturday's violence on X and, quote, sending thoughts to President Trump.
What I wish we saw this week was a Republican Party coming back to its senses. What I'm concerned we're going to see is an ultra-MAGA party that wants to strip away freedom, democracy, and an economy that works for working people.
We'll have extensive coverage of the convention throughout the week, so stick with us. For now, in Milwaukee, Vanessa Kelson.